term multinational corporation used to be earlier synonymous with foreign multinational enterprises. No longer this is true. At least some, if not many, enterprises in the developing countries, including India, have become multinational enterprises. We are all aware that globalization is a very crucial, is a very important component of the economic reforms. Though human resource management function, whether domestic or international, involves many challenges, but these challenges are much more critical in international business. As we know that global corporations have global strategies. In order to achieve a global strategy, the HRM, that is human resource management function, plays a very vital role. It is increasingly being recognized as a very important determinant of success or failure of international business. Let us try to say why human resource management function is much more important and much more complex in international business.
Today, if organizations have to compete on a global scale, it is not how hard they work, but how smart they work. This requires a shift away from control to commitment, inducement to involvement, and fear and favoritism to fairness. And multinational businesses can thrive only if they are able to motivate the people to superior performance. The expectations of people are higher, and the expectations of organizations also are higher. And this puts squarely greater challenge on the human resource function.
Global companies require global managers. The role that human resource managers play in such situation is very crucial. They have to provide the organization with the right type of people at right time and at right place. But it's not easy to get the right type of people for any organization. It is for the human resource managers to locate, to identify, to train, and to place people in different positions in different countries when the company is operating at multinational level, and see that they are able to face the environment in which they are placed, and they are able to give the highest amount of productivity, the quality product, and that they are able to satisfy the consumers in that country, the government in that country, and various interest groups, so that organization gets an acceptability in a new environment.
The concept of think globally and act locally proves the point beyond doubt that HRM plays a very vital and important role in international business in managing the cultural issues which stem out of the nature of the business most of the transnational organizations perform in various countries.
The four main staffing approaches in international business are ethnocentric, polycentric, regiocentric, and geocentric. In the ethnocentric staffing approach, most of the managerial positions are filled with nationals of the parent company. In the case of polycentric approach, most of the managerial positions are filled with persons drawn from the local country. In the case of regiocentric approach, the managers are drawn from the region, and that way we have a mix of managers from the parent company, managers from the host country, and managers from the third countries. In the case of geocentric approach, managers are drawn from all over the world. So what is the nationality of the manager is not important. So we try to recruit the best talent wherever it might be. Now each staffing approach has its users, it has its advantages and disadvantages. Now it has also been observed that many of the multinational corporations and the successful multinational corporations, I should say, they recruit managers from the host country, except for a few positions at the top. Now a question arises that Are all these staffing approaches really alternative approaches? And if they are, then what are the relevant situations in which they are applicable?
MNCs look at staffing requirements in any country. They have to keep in mind two things. One, business needs. Second, sensitivity to local expectations and aspirations. And it is locals who understand locals very well. And if companies want to do business, they need as business managers people who understand the local nuances. If you really look at, I think, a company like Coca-Cola, when it advertised in the past, it was based on American advertisements only. But now, when Coca-Cola has staged a comeback, it is ethnic advertisement. This you find all over. What I mean to say is that there is no ethnocentric or geocentric or polycentric approach in the recruitment of people below board level. It is essentially based on the fit between the job and the person based on the skills, and the availability of skills is not the monopoly of any nation, and therefore increasingly MNCs are asked to locate people from within the countries where they operate.
What I would like to emphasize here is there cannot be one single panacea to this approach, and it should not be viewed in isolation, but should be viewed in totality. That's how I would say, while approaching the staff issues, we must have a total open-minded approach, and it totally depends on the situation and depending on the needs of the organization at that juncture.
What in actual practice we find is that there is a combination of most of these approaches. And the companies try to have also a central control from the head office so that they can manage the enterprises on a given policy, on a given parameter, and also they would like to satisfy the local aspirations by taking local people. So a mix of these four approaches is most workable, and most of the companies today are following it.
So in terms of attracting the best people, in terms of retaining people, in terms of people feeling valued, in terms of contribution and innovation, a diverse workforce definitely contributes to the organization's success. Now, having said that, what's the downside? Or what are the disadvantages? I would personally say there are no significant disadvantages. I would say there are challenges involved in managing diversity. The challenge of people in the organization being culturally sensitive, the challenge of continuous education, the challenge of continuously looking at organizational systems and processes that value diversity. And these are some challenges, but I would definitely not say that there are disadvantages to cultural diversity in an organization.
Motivation is a very important factor in determining the performance and productivity of an individual. Now, in this context, three theories come to our mind. Number one, Maslow's need hierarchy theory. Number two, Herzberg's two-factor theory, or motivation hygiene theory, or content and context theory. Number three, McClelland's achievement motivation theory. Now, we all know that these theories were developed in the USA. A question arises that are these theories relevant in the cross-cultural context? For instance, what is the meaning of work may differ from one country to another. Let us examine that are these theories applicable in the international context.
Though these studies, particularly of Maslow and Herzberg, were carried out initially in the US, they have been tested in various countries around the world, including India. I can also refer to the study of Professor Baldev Sharma, who was earlier with us at IMI, and subsequently he became the director in Shriram Center for Investigations. He made a study of 51 organizations, both public and private, covering about 1,700 supervisory staff. Though he did not use either Maslow's framework or Herzberg's framework, the conclusions that he found are no different from those of either Maslow or Herzberg. So this proves that these findings can be universal.
Everywhere people need love, affection, recognition, And for that reason, we can say that Maslow's theory is okay. But then, what Maslow talks, for instance, about the need hierarchy may not be true. There are occasions when people who die for their recognition. People in army fight for the country and they don't care for their body. So safety need is just taken out. They don't care for the personal safety at all. Same is the case with industry. If people get proper recognition, they can do wonders. And to that extent, I see in some cultural environments, people are more prone towards getting recognition, love and esteem than the physical needs alone. And that way, these theories have to be applied in a modified form in different countries.
The Maslow theory of hierarchy of needs is more with reference to American context, and it may not be exactly applicable to other cultures. However, it doesn't mean that Maslow's theory of hierarchy of needs cannot be made applicable to the other work environments. But what it needs to be emphasized here is that, for instance, an American views self-actualization is the most important for him as a sort of motivation. But for other Asian countries and for Japanese, for instance, they would reckon the security, job employment, long-term continuity of employment are more important needs as a motivational factors rather than self-actualization. So in order to distinguish how a Maslow theory of hierarchy of needs applicable to an American context with reference to the Asian context, it needs to apply and understand the culture and the background of the organizations and the countries in which is operating before we try to adopt these concepts universally.
Now, we often say that the reward or compensation system should be designed in such a way so that it is culturally appropriate. Now, what is culturally appropriate reward or compensation system? Let us try to examine this with the help of some examples.
Performance depends upon motivation. And if we can reward people adequately, they can give best performance. In international business, particularly when people are posted overseas, the problem of reward, the problem of compensation comes. Because people have to adjust in an entirely new environment, a new pattern of life. When they are accustomed to a particular standard of life, particular quality of life, particular way of living, particular way of thinking, particular way of socializing, in other countries all these things are changed. And there are numerous hardships to which they are exposed to and the problems which they have to face. Given this type of hostile environment, it becomes the duty of the organization to compensate people. I will just give an example. For instance, Volkswagen, they have adopted a balance sheet approach where managers overseas are given, besides the basic pay, the cost of living allowance, which is computed normally on the basis of the cost of living index developed by United Nations. Then they are given overseas allowance, which normally comes to about 15% of the basic pay. Then there are allowance for housing, allowance for local taxation that they have to pay, allowance for the children education and all these factors. So the employee is adequately compensated so that when he goes in a new environment, he doesn't face the type of problems which otherwise he will have to if the pay package is not attractive.
Reward and compensation in an international business and in its context is a very, very complex issue. One of the most fundamental principles in handling this issue, according to me, would be that within the broad parameters and philosophy of any transnational organization, the compensation package should be market-driven. That is, in the particular market where the manager is posted to operate his business. However, having said that, at the same time, we need to bear in fact that the person who has been posted to a local market from a different country should be compensated in order to motivate him to perform well. This can be addressed through various factors, such as by paying him a compensation as a cost of living allowance or as a premium for transfer or for mobility expenses. But while addressing these issues, two factors have to be borne in mind. One is that what is the market environment which prompts such payment, and secondly, there should be an internal equity while making such payments in order to ensure that people of same type of category of workmen or employees or managers are treated on par.
Western material cultures depend more on philosophy of having. Eastern spiritual cultures depend more on a culture of being. So whether we want to be something or whether we want to have something makes a difference in terms of how we are motivated. And these cultural differences need to be borne in mind when we look at the reward system. Further, I may also add that Mahatma Gandhi said, you can provide for a person's needs but not for a person's greed, and therefore if material culture is taken beyond a point, then it can have a counterproductive effect on the organization also. Second, I think some companies tend to focus too much on money, and as Benjamin Franklin says, a person who works only for money is capable of doing anything for money. And therefore, when we are really developing compensation systems, what is ideal is you conduct a study of what people consider as rewards and try to reinforce the four principles of an effective reward system, that is salience, valence, equity, and contingency.
Tailoring the compensation and benefit systems to suit cultural specific issues is important. It is important not only from a perspective of meeting the needs of the individuals. You can take examples such as in some industries which are based in rural areas or some larger labor-intensive industries, the compensation and benefits take into account things like milk allowance, clothing, blankets. Now, these are very, very specific to our cultural needs. It also falls into some of the organizational philosophy that we have, things like a paternalistic organizational philosophy. It also falls into the situation of what is relevant from a perspective of social and political necessity. If we were not sensitive to providing things like DNS allowance or city compensatory allowance, we may have statutory implications in terms of the way we design our CMB policies. So, yes, my response is CMB systems will differ depending upon socio-political needs in the country, the laws of the land, and will be specific to the cultural needs of its people.
Active leadership is crucial to the achievement of company goals. The challenge here is what is effective or appropriate leadership in the international or mixed cultural situations. Let us take the example of India and Japan. I shall not take the example of USA because culturally it is quite different from India and Japan. Now the question is that what are the differences in expectations and appropriate leadership behaviors in the two countries? Is the convergence taking place in this respect in India and Japan?
Leadership does not take place in a vacuum. Leadership should be studied in conjunction with the profile of the followers or followership. If you, for example, want to make a comparison between Japan and India, Git Hofstede's study on culture's consequences suggests that Indians are more masculine-oriented and Japanese feminine orientation. Indians more comfortable with uncertainty, but Japanese are more comfortable with certainty. Indians are more prone to taking risks, whereas Japanese are not. In that sense, we find glaring cultural differences, and these glaring cultural differences reflect on the leadership patterns also. It is not only that. In terms of the profile of the followers also, you find glaring contrast. For example, among the Japanese workers, there is a heightened sense of the concept of guilt or shame if something is not done. Whether we find the same thing in Indian context is something that needs exploration. To my view, I think we don't really suffer from the same sense of guilt or shame as the average Japanese person would have. And this makes it difficult for any person to emulate the Japanese leadership style in an Indian context.
Take an American example. The leadership is viewed based on a charisma of an employee. For instance, if you take John F. Kennedy or Iacocca, they have made themselves a mark in their society as a great leaders to emulate and follow. But in the context of the Asian, especially in a Japanese context, it is viewed totally more on task-related or work-related rather than in a sort of a charisma or a popularity.
I believe leadership theories can be transferred by managers across continents, provided there is the issue and understanding of the local cultural sensitivity and the way they position themselves in an organizational context. Let me give you an example. For instance, in China, the leader is only the leader of the political party, whereas the leader of an organization is considered to be much more as a teacher and coach, which is considered to be a position of great respect. So the positioning of the leader as a teacher and coach is an important positioning instead of just being a leader in the context of a political party.
Leadership styles can be transformed, but it takes time because new perceptions have to be developed. And these perceptions develop because of interaction. For instance, when the companies are coming for joint ventures, collaborations, the host companies are able to see how the companies which are coming for collaboration work, what type of leadership style they follow. And these are going to have an impact over the local companies in course of time. But it's a process which has to be gradual. The local managerial styles cannot be changed overnight because the people are accustomed to work in a particular manner, deal with people in a particular manner, handle situations in a particular manner. They have a particular type of perception, and these perceptions will be changed in course of time.
Collaborations in joint ventures is a phenomenon which has been witnessed all over the globe in an increasing measure. Now, from the leadership point of view, international joint ventures present complex situations in which the leaders must anticipate and address to the cross-cultural problems. The question is, what are the leadership problems involved in cross-cultural joint ventures?
In a joint venture situation, the complex task a leader faces is to manage people who come from diverse cultures. This is a heterogeneous mix. In order to balance their attitudes, behaviors, and the cultural diversity, the leader has to exhibit and demonstrate his leadership skills to bring the team in what we call a group synergy. In order to obtain this group synergy, the leader has to build and develop the team as a homogeneous team. This is a thankless job for which leader needs to demonstrate high degree of skills in order to achieve the joint venture a successful venture in the corporate world.
The issue of trust and building trust is also important because transnational organizations or global corporations have a global agenda in terms of their business, whereas the joint venture partner locally may have a local agenda. So for an effective relationship to be developed, there is an aspect of being local a combination of being global as well as understanding the local needs and having a global agenda may contribute to a more effective joint ventures relationship.
There have to be a give and take on both the sides, a mutual trust on both the sides, and a lasting relation on both the sides. In India, there have been experiences where the companies first, the multinationals first came to have a joint venture and then ultimately trying to finish off the company, take over that company completely in its grip. And that is why a lot of industries in India are afraid of these joint ventures, and they are saying that there is no level playing field. Those coming from outside, they are stronger, they can beat them, they can take them over. So an environment has to be created where trust is generated so that companies can work together.
So, with a discussion about the problems involved in cross-cultural joint ventures, we conclude this part of the program. In this part of the program, as you might have seen, we have covered topics such as the various staffing approaches in international business, the applicability of motivation theories, the reward and compensation system, and appropriate styles and leadership behaviors in international business, particularly in relation to the international joint ventures. In the second part of this program, we shall take up some further questions relating to the transferability of motivation theories or the transferability of leadership styles and behaviors, the challenges arising from workforce diversity, the pros and cons of group diversity, and the challenges involved in devising international training and development programs, and lastly, the role of communication.